Hello and welcome back to Forza Horizon 5. And in this video, we're going to be checking out the 73 Datsun 240Z from the Fast X car pack. Now, if you're not familiar with this car, that's perfectly understandable because while this car does have a following, it's not necessarily quite on the same scale as, say, for example, the following for the 1970 Charger from the same car pack. However, I mean, if you bought the car pack and you spent the money on it, you might as well get the usage out of all the cars. At least that's kind of the way I like to look at it with these car packs. Now, granted, if you don't like a certain car, then you just don't like a certain car, and that's just gonna be that. But even if this car is kind of in the realm for you of, well, I don't necessarily know if I like it or not, I'm not necessarily sure if I want to jump on that car or not, I would still recommend giving it a try because it's a lot of fun. It's also really quick right out of the box. And on top of all of that, once you get it down to its like maximum weight reduction of like 2,300 pounds, you can make like over 1,000 horsepower in a 2,300 pound car. I mean, like, that's absolutely wild and ridiculous in terms of, even by Forza standards, that's ridiculous. And honestly, it also sounds really, really good, although it's not quite as, I would say, extremely pronounced in terms of its sound as like the Hellcat is, because the Hellcat has that extremely loud supercharger whine, and the turbo sound in this thing is not quite as loud, it's not quite as pronounced, but it still sounds really good. And of course, the turbo sound does get a little bit louder if you decide to go for the race turbo upgrade or the race turbo with anti-lag, which we did do a little bit later on in the video. But even the stock turbo in this thing sounds really, really nice. Now, I did want to make sure I did a burnout test because, I mean, I did it in the other two videos. I did it in the other two cars that I tested from the same DLC. And I was like, you know what? We honestly might as well do another burnout test. I mean, it's like it's sitting right there. But of course, with all of that, it's time to head back over to the garage and nail down some upgrades for this thing. Now, one thing that I was kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say back and forth about, but one thing that I was a little bit like iffy on is I genuinely wasn't sure how many upgrades were going to be available for it, especially in terms of the engine. But luckily, I'm honestly really glad that they kind of just left the floor open to whatever you wanted to do, obviously outside of swapping the engine, because all you can do in terms of conversions is drivetrain swap this car, which is, I mean, it's kind of whatever. Again, I'm sure there's going to be somebody out there that's mad or angry that they're not going to be able to put a V12 in it. But if you're that angry that you're not going to be able to put a V12 in this car, I feel like it's not really all that big of a deal. It's like, yeah, this wasn't meant for a V12 swap in the first place. So if you were buying this car with the intention of like, I'm going to put a V12 in it, I feel like that's not necessarily the best direction for this car. But then again, that's my opinion. But as you do continue to throw more parts at this engine, you realize that it actually has a good bit of flexibility in terms of the upgrade ceiling, so to speak, because you could have it around 800 horsepower, you could have it around 900, you could have it around 1,000, you could have it at almost 1,100. Now, as I mentioned before, the amount of weight reduction that you can do on this car is actually pretty dramatic. You can get it down to around 2,300 pounds, which is essentially about NA Miata weight, which in a car like this with this much power, that's genuinely incredible. That's actually more than incredible. That's kind of wacky, actually, because can you imagine, like, just for a second, driving an NA Miata with like even anywhere close to that much power? And also, I love all of the little visual details on the car, like, for example, the side exit exhaust over on the passenger side of the car, as well as all of the little details that you can see, like, for example, where it actually says Vibrant on the intercooler, or, for example, the branding that is actually, you know, baked into the turbo. It actually looks really, really good, and the amount of detail that is in this car, I actually think is one of the more closely detailed modified cars that we get in Horizon, or at least that we've gotten lately. Now, as we get ready to take this thing for its first drive after the upgrades, I do want to go ahead and let y'all know that all we did was put parts on it. I didn't go in and do any kind of custom tuning. There's no, fancy editing in between when we built it and when we drove it. There was no like hidden tuning in there or anything like that. This is just as the game gave it to us. And once we get over to the runway, I'm gonna go ahead and let y'all take a listen to what this thing sounds like after all the upgrades, because it's actually pretty wild. So again, far from the fastest thing in the game, obviously, but it's certainly no slouch, and it's certainly not what I would call slow. I'm sure that there are going to be some people out there that are going to say, oh, that's slow. You know, I have a million cars in my garage that are faster than that. And I mean, if you do want to discount this car and just not use it at all because it's not the fastest thing, or it's not the next fastest car that you're going to have in your garage, that's fine. Although I feel like if you're constantly just solely hunting for whatever your next, you know, top speed car is, you're honestly going to get bored. You're going to get so bored with the game, and you're going to get so bored with all of your cars. And if top speed is the only thing you really care about, there's a lot of great cars in this game that you are going to miss out on. However, that is not at all to discount, you know, high-speed highway racing being a reason to play the game, because I know that there's a lot of people that play Horizon solely for the supercars, solely for the fact that some of them can get over 270, 280, some even 290 miles an hour. And to be honest, like, that's entirely fine. It's just not the only reason that I have to play the game. And if that was the only reason I had to play the game, I know that for me personally, that would just get boring really quick, to be honest. However, as we get a little bit further on in this test, I did want to bring something up about this car pack in general, because this car pack, it kind of has me intrigued a little, because, you know, obviously these were all, like, all of the cars that we got are going to be cars that people that are fans of the Fast series are going to know, right? These are all going to be very recognizable cars. Now, does this mean that if this pack sells well, that we might see more potential Fast and Furious car packs later on down the line? I mean, that's entirely up in the air, I'm sure. I'm not sure if that's necessarily what the developers are trying to focus on right now. However, if they were, there are a lot of other cars from the history of the series that I would love to see continued on in Forza, because a lot of these cars, you know, it's like once they're in, there's kind of a chance, or at least there's a greater chance, that they might return later on down the road. That's obviously not guaranteed with a lot of these cars, though, because there are some cars that have just been in one Forza game or just in one Horizon game, never to be seen again. So I would really hope that a lot of these cars will make their way into future installments of the series, and also potentially pave the way for additional cars from the Fast series. So hopefully that's what we get later on down the road. But again, that's all entirely up in the air, and there's no confirmation on that whatsoever. It's literally all speculation. So in terms of what we actually have right now, I definitely think this pack is a good place to start. Now, would I buy the pack again? I probably would. I mean, I would definitely have to get a little bit more time with some of these cars to really kind of decide whether or not I feel like the pack was truly worth the price. Although, if you're going to use all of the cars, or even like maybe, I don't know, like all but one of the cars, if maybe there's one car in the pack that you don't like, that you don't want to use, I would still say it's probably worth it. However, if you're only planning on using one of the cars, it's not worth it. So definitely keep that in mind if you are planning on getting this pack, because if you're only intending on using one car, then it's probably not worth the price of entry. And I've talked about this in a couple of my other videos on this, you know, exact car pack, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to want to buy this pack because it's got the Hellcat wide body. And I know that that's a really popular car. I know that that's a really attractive car for a lot of people. However, I don't know if just that one car makes it worth buying the entire car pack. But then again, that's entirely a value proposition that is up to you to decide. And whether the answer to that is yes or no is, again, entirely up to you. But with that, that is where we are going to end our look at the new 240Z from the Fast X car pack in Forza Horizon 5. Now, if y'all enjoyed and you would like to see more, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I will see y'all next time.